वीडियो आपके ऊपर होगी।
हाँ जी, होती है वीडियो। Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, students. As I've told you, we are going to do carcinoid tumor of the small intestine today. I have covered all these tumors. If I have time, then I will going to repeat them just for a revision. So we are going to do with the carcinoid tumor. Carcinoid I did with you in the stomach as well. I hope you remember that. So now we are going to do small intestinal neoplasm. They were left because of the shortage of time. So in the small intestine, adenocarcinoma is quite rare, while carcinoid tumor and lymphoma are more common tumors in the small intestine. So we have carcinoid, then we have lymphoma, and then we have tumors of the anal canal I'm going to do. Okay. Carcinoid tumors, they originate from the endocrine system, and they are also referred to as well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumors. As there are neuroendocrine cells present scattered throughout the gastrointestinal tract and in other areas like tracheobronchial tract. So carcinoid can be present anywhere, either in the small intestine, and they can also be present in the stomach, they can be present in tracheobronchial tree, lungs. They are the most common site for the carcinoid tumor. So carcinoid tumor, the newer name for the carcinoid tumor is well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumors. They are found in the gastrointestinal tract, and 40% of the GI tract tumors occur in the small intestine. The other areas where you can find carcinoid are tracheobronchial trees, lungs. They are the most common sites for the carcinoid tumor. Gastric carcinoid we have already done, but I'm going to just repeat few lines. They are associated with endocrine cell hyperplasia within the mucosa of the stomach as well. And they are also associated with autoimmune chronic atrophic gastritis. Most of the, in men, one syndrome, gastrinoma, occurs which can lead to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Gastric endocrine cell hyperplasia may be linked to the proton pump inhibitor therapy. Proton pump inhibitor therapy is given in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. So this proton pump inhibitor therapy can also lead to endocrine cell hyperplasia in the stomach. So the carcinoid tumor, they are well differentiated neuroendocrine tumor. Most of them occur in small intestine, 40% of them, but they can be seen in stomach and other GI tract location. They are also present in the tracheobronchial tree and lungs. Okay. Stomach carcinoids are associated with Zollinger-Ellison syndrome as well. This is an older classification of the carcinoid tumor. Now we will not classify like foregut, midgut, hindgut, but previously, if some examiner is of old school of thought, he or she might ask you, what are the sites of origin? So you can say foregut, midgut, hindgut, but these are the older terminology. I'm just showing you the older terminology in order you to be familiar with that as well. So in the foregut, bronchopulmonary tract, esophagus, stomach, duodenum, pancreas, hepatobiliary tract. Midgut is jejunum, ileum, appendix, ascending colon. Hindgut is transverse colon, descending colon, rectum, ovaries or testes. So these are the frequency of carcinoid in different areas of the body. But according to the new classification, we only say the carcinoid of stomach, carcinoid of small intestine, carcinoid of lungs. So we do not use this foregut, midgut or hindgut classification anymore, okay? On the gross examination of the carcinoid tumors, they are intramural or submucosal masses. They can be present within the muscle layer or they can be present under the mucosa of the submucosa of the small intestine. These create small polypoidal lesions. Small polypoidal lesions can be seen. The overlying mucosa may be intact or it can be ulcerated. Tumors can invade deeply into the mesentery as well. On gross appearance, they are also yellow tan in color. They are very firm masses because of the desmoplastic reaction and which can cause kinking and obstruction to the bowel wall. Desmoplastic reaction I've already explained you, but I'm again going to explain to you. It is the increase in the fibrous tissue stroma because of the reaction of the tumor which is present in the vicinity. So desmoplasia, wherever we use this term, means increased fibroblastic proliferation in relation to the tumor. So desmoplasia leads to the firmness to the tumor, and this firmness can cause kinking or obstruction to the small intestine. So on gross examination, carcinoid tumors can be present as intramurally or in the submucosal, or they can create polypoidal masses that can project into the lumen of the intestine as well. Overlying mucosa can be intact or it can be ulcerated because of the pressure of the tumor. This tumor can invade into the mesentery as well. They, on the gross appearance, in the color, they are yellow or tan in color, and they are very firm because of the fibrous tissue reaction or desmoplastic reaction. Sometimes they can cause kinking or the obstruction to the bowel wall. Microscopically, carcinoids, they have a typical pattern. They are composed of monotonous looking cells which have a scanty pinkish granular cytoplasm and round to oval stipple nucleus. They can be composed of islands of cells or sheets of cells, or they can form trabecular pattern, or they can form strands. Sometimes these carcinoid cells also form glands like pattern or sheets with scan. And the cells are always called monotonous looking, that is, they look like too much one with each other, they are like each other, and they have pinkish granular cytoplasm, and their nuclei are round to oval. Okay. Minimum pleomorphism is seen, but mitosis, anaplasia, and necrosis can be seen. Immunohistochemically, carcinoid are positive with synaptophysin and chromogranin A because they are neuroendocrine tumor. So they have to be positive for synaptophysin and chromogranin A. Okay. So this is the immunological markers which show that synaptophysin and chromogranin are positive in carcinoid tumor. So microscopically, they can form any pattern ranging from strands to bacilli sheets, or they can form gland-like structures, and they're composed of monotonous looking cells which have scanty pinkish or eosinophilic cytoplasm with oval stipple nuclei. There is minimal pleomorphism, but mitosis, anaplasia, and necrosis can be seen that will favor the that is of unfavorable prognostic signs. Immunohistochemically, synaptophysin and chromogranin are positive. This is the gross appearance of the carcinoid of the small intestine. You can see the opened up section of small intestine showing a nodular yellowish mass which is hanging into the lumen of the bowel. Okay, so this is the carcinoid tumor. Other neoplasm which can hang in the ball-like manner within the intestine. Any questions, students? Okay, we can have a question and answer session after this. Okay. Okay. So the other benign tumors which can be present in this fashion hanging on the gross appearance can be benign tumors like leiomyoma, fibroma, neurofibroma, and lipomas. They can also be present in the polypoidal fashion within the lumen of the small intestine. So this is a carcinoid yellowish appearance and having projecting into the lumen of the small intestine. Okay. Microscopically, you can see these are islands of monotonous looking cells. This is one island, this is other, this is another. And you can see this pinkish fibrous tissue stroma in between, which I was telling you are desmoplastic reaction. Neuroendocrine cells, salt and pepper chromatin, you can say. They are monotonous looking cells having pinkish eosinophilic cytoplasm, which is very scanty. And you can see stippling or the salt and pepper appearance of the chromatin within the nucleus of these cells. Granular nucleochromatin pattern. Okay, so this is the microscopic appearance of a carcinoid tumor of the small intestine, and this is the high power view. These are again carcinoid tumor. This picture is given in your Robbins. You can see carcinoid tumor hanging within the lumen here. This is the scanner view showing the mucosa is pushed in a pointed manner. A tumor is present within the submucosa. This is on the low power. You can see mucosa on the top and islands of tumor cells here. Here you can see high power view showing prominent, one of the cells you can see as a prominent structure. You can see pinkish eosinophilic cytoplasm, and you can see this nuclei which have irregular chromatin clumping. Okay, So this is the carcinoid tumor of the small intestine, the gross microscopic picture, and this is the electron microscopic picture showing granules within the cell cytoplasm. This is the older classification, as I've told you, foregut, midgut, hindgut, but we do not use it. But when you do silver staining, all of these are argentophil, argyrophil positive or argyrophil positive, but argentophil negative can be seen. Chromogranin and synaptophysin are positive in all of them. These tumors, they produce 5-hydroxytryptamine. They can also produce other hormones, and they can lead to carcinoid syndrome. In the blood, they can produce 5-HTP, histamine, multi-hormonal, occasionally secrete ACTH. All of them can do this secretion. They can lead to carcinoid syndrome, especially those who metastasize to the liver. Okay, the liver, these products are metabolized, leading to carcinoid syndrome. The clinical feature of carcinoid syndrome is the peak incidence of the carcinoid tumors are in the 6th decade of life. Symptoms are determined by the hormones they produce. If gastrin is produced by them, then they will lead to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Ileal tumors, they can cause carcinoid syndrome, which is characterized by cutaneous flushing, that is redness in the color of the skin. They can also lead to bronchospasm. They can lead to colicky abdominal pain, diarrhea, right-sided cardiac valvular fibrosis. Carcinoid syndrome can be seen in 10% of the tumor, and it is caused by vasoactive substances secreted by the tumors into the circulation. Okay. So clinical features depends upon the which type of hormone they are going to elaborate, and mostly they are seen in the 6th decade of life. If they elaborate gastrin, they will lead to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. And ileal tumors can lead to cutaneous flushing, bronchospasm, colicky abdominal pain, diarrhea, right-sided cardiac valvular fibrosis. Carcinoid syndrome occurs in less than 10% of the tumor and is caused by vasoactive substances which are secreted into the circulation by the tumor cells. So again, clinical features, they can be asymptomatic. They can lead to obstruction and interception of bleeding because of the presence in the lumen of the intestine. They can elaborate hormone. If the gastrin is elaborated, they can lead to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. They can lead to Cushing syndrome if they are elaborating adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. The 5-year survival rate is quite good. It is 90%. Small bowel carcinoid with liver metastasis, the 5-year survival rate is around 50%. So 5-year survival rate with liver metastasis is 50%, which is less than the other carcinoid tumors. Okay. So this diagram shows the carcinoid syndrome. Malignant carcinoid syndrome is a clinical entity which is marked by flushing, diarrhea, abdominal cramping, wheezing, heart valve dysfunction, and pellagra. Flushing on the face, 63 to 74% of cases. Cardiac disease is seen in 14 to 41. Diarrhea is seen in 68 to 73%. Dermatitis in 5%. Abdominal pain or cramps are seen in 10 to 34%, and bronchoconstriction can be seen in 3 to 18% because these produce different kind of hormone which can lead to carcinoid syndrome. So carcinoid syndrome, they are slow growing, they metastasize as well. The common primary site are small and large intestine, more commonly small intestine and large intestine, in the stomach, in the pancreas, and in the liver. All these sites you can see the carcinoid tumor. Okay, I hope carcinoid tumor is clear because we also did it in our when I did the tumors of the stomach. So this is the carcinoid tumor of the small intestine. If you have any question, you can ask me now or you can send me to WhatsApp. Next is the lymphoma. Lymphoma of the small intestine. I have told you what are malt lymphomas. Okay, in the stomach we did mucosa associated lymphoid tissue can undergo lymphoma, and these are called malt lymphomas. So similarly, small intestinal lymphoid tissue, which is in the form of Peyer's patches. All of you know that through your histology. So lymphomas can be seen in the small intestine as well. 40% of lymphomas arise in other sites than lymph nodes, and gut is the most common site. 1 to 4% of gastrointestinal malignancies are lymphomas. Primary gastrointestinal lymphoma exhibit no evidence of liver, spleen, or bone marrow involvement at the time of diagnosis. Primary gastrointestinal lymphoma we are only going to call when we do not have any site where lymphoma is present, either in the liver, spleen, or bone marrow. If it is present, then we can say this is secondarily involved by the lymphoma in other organs. So primary lymphoma, only the GI tract has to be involved, and this is called Malt lymphoma, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue lymphoma. Okay, and all of you know mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue is in the form of Peyer's patches in the ileum. Sporadic lymphoma arise from the B cells of the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue or MALT. This usually affects adults more commonly. They lack a sex predilection and may arise anywhere in the gut. Gee, excuse me, any question? Okay. This usually affects adults. They lack a sex predilection and may arise anywhere in the gut. In the stomach, 55 to 60% of the lymphoma can be seen. They can arise in the small intestine or they can arise anywhere in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. And these are mostly B cell lymphomas. Okay. Mostly B cell lymphomas, and they are non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Hodgkin lymphomas are not seen in the gastrointestinal tract. Mostly what we see in the gastrointestinal tract are non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and they are mostly B cell lymphoma, which are associated with mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. In the stomach, they can be present in 55 to 60%. Small intestine, 25 to 30%. Proximal colon, 10 to 15%, and distant colon, 10%. Colon is less commonly involved as compared to small intestine and stomach. Gastric malt lymphomas arise in the setting of mucosal lymphoid activation as a result of Helicobacter associated chronic gastritis, which we have already done. Celiac disease is also associated with a higher than normal risk of T cell lymphoma. So in stomach, it is mostly associated with H. pylori infection and chronic gastritis, and in celiac disease, lymphoma can also be seen more commonly than in a normal person. So primary GI tract lymphomas have a better prognosis than do those arising in other sites. Treatment is again combined surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy. So gastrointestinal tract lymphomas are called malt lymphomas. Mostly they can be seen in stomach or small intestine. In stomach, they are associated with H. pylori infection, and in the intestine, they can be associated with celiac disease. They are large B-cell lymphomas, and they can be present in adults without any other lymphomas present in the body. They can be called gastrointestinal tract lymphomas. Okay. Okay, I hope it is clear. Next is the tumors of the anal canal. Tumors of the anal canal can be divided into three parts because the upper zone is lined by columnar or rectal epithelium, the middle third by transitional epithelium, and the lower third by stratified squamous epithelium. So wherever the tumor arises, it has to be from that type of epithelium. So when we divide the anal canal, it can be divided into three parts. Number one part is upper zone, which is lined by columnar or rectal mucosal epithelium. Middle part is by the transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium is similar as the transitional epithelium in the bladder, which is they are called urothelium. And lower third is involved by the stratified squamous epithelium. Carcinoma of the anal canal may have atypical glandular or squamous pattern of differentiation, recapitulating the normal epithelium of upper and lower thirds respectively. So either we can see adenocarcinomas which have a glandular pattern which arise from the upper one third of the epithelium, or we can have squamous cell carcinoma which arise from the lower one third of the anal canal epithelium. Okay, so they recapitulate the same type of epithelium from which they are arising. An additional differentiation pattern is basiloid pattern, which is present in tumors, which is populated by immature cells derived from the basal layer of the transitional epithelium. Basal layer of the transitional epithelium can give rise to tumor, and they have a basiloid pattern, and they can be called the basal type of tumor as well. So if you see, this is the normal colonic epithelium, and this is the squamous epithelium. And here you can see the transitional epithelium. So these tumors can be adenocarcinoma, basiloid type, or squamous cell carcinoma. When the entire tumor displays a basiloid pattern, the term which is used is coechogenic carcinoma is still often applied. Coechogenic carcinoma is an older terminology, but I'm just telling you if somebody asks you what is a cloacogenic carcinoma, you can say if the basaloid pattern is displayed by the entire tumor, then it can be called cloacogenic carcinoma. And basaloid pattern, I've told you, is because of the presence of the transitional epithelium. Okay, so there can be glandular tumor, adenocarcinoma, squamous type of pattern, squamous cell carcinoma, or basaloid type of pattern, which can be called cloacogenic carcinoma if most of the tumor is of basaloid pattern as well. Alternatively, basaloid differentiation may be mixed with squamous or mucinous differentiation. All are considered variants of anal canal carcinoma. Pure squamous cell carcinoma of the anal canal is frequently associated with human papilloma viral infection, which also cause precursor lesions such as condyloma acuminatum. HPV, human papilloma virus. All of you know that this causes carcinoma of the cervix of the female genital tract because it is a squamous cell carcinoma. So squamous cell carcinoma in the anal canal can be related to HPV infection or human papilloma viral infection. The precursor lesion for HPV infections are known as condyloma acuminatum. These are the viral warts, which you have done. I think already you have done viral warts. Next is the appendix. Appendix is a surgical emergency because the patient can present with acute appendicitis. You must have seen in your surgical wards that they are mostly acute appendicitis is seen in young adults and adolescents. And the lifetime of developing acute appendicitis is 7%. Males are more commonly affected than females. 50 to 80% of cases, acute appendicitis is associated with overt luminal obstruction, usually which is caused by a small stone like a mass or a solid fecalith, which can be present within the appendix. Or a gallstone can obstruct the appendix, or tumor or worm, mass of worms can obstruct the appendix. So acute appendicitis mostly is seen in young adults, and it is because of the obstruction to the lumen of the appendix. This obstruction can be because of the fecalith. Most commonly, it is because of a fecalith. Sometimes, if a person is suffering from worm infestation, some worms can also block the appendix. Okay. Why it is a surgical emergency? Because if it is not treated, it can lead to perforation and it can lead to peritonitis with infection spreading all over the peritoneal cavity. So it has to be diagnosed promptly, and promptly it has to be treated by surgical resection of the appendix. All of you know that it is a rudimentary organ, it has no function, but it can lead to acute appendicitis, which can lead to infection of the whole of the abdomen and peritoneum. Pathogenesis. Acute appendicitis is initiated by increase in the intraluminal pressure that comprises venous flow. In 50 to 80% of cases of acute appendicitis, it is associated with obstruction by a fecalith within the lumen of the appendix or a mass of worms, Oxyuris vermicularis. It infects the appendix and it can lead to blockage of the lumen of the appendix, or less commonly it is by the gallstone or a tumor. Stasis of luminal contents favors bacterial proliferation, triggers ischemia and inflammatory response. So why this inflammation is occurred? Because of the stasis, bacterial proliferation occurs, triggers ischemia because it is going to compromise to the blood supply, which can lead to ischemia, and inflammatory response is going to develop, leading to acute appendicitis. On the gross appearance of the serosa of the appendix, it becomes dull, granular, and erythematous. Erythematous means it is red in color. Microscopically, when you receive an appendix, you have to take the cut section and longitudinal section of the appendix, and in order to see the inflammation. So when you see them under the microscope, the mucosa of the appendix is quite ulcerated. The lumen is filled with acute inflammatory infiltrate, and this acute inflammatory infiltrate is also present in all the layers. But the diagnosis of acute appendicitis requires infiltration of polymorphonuclear leukocyte or neutrophils in the muscular layer, when seen by the microscopic examination. So acute appendicitis is diagnosed when we see neutrophilic infiltrate present within the muscular layer of the appendix. Okay. So later, large areas of hemorrhage, ulceration, and gangrenous necrosis can also lead to serosa, and it can rupture and lead to peritonitis. As I've already told you, it is a surgical emergency because if appendix rupture, it is going to spread the infection throughout the peritoneal cavity, leading to peritonitis. Patient can go into the shock as well. Okay. So this is the gross appearance of appendix as your exam slide as well. OSPE slide, you can see brownish discoloration. Appendix is large and rough and granular in appearance. This is the acute appendicitis on the gross appearance. Microscopically, you can see ulceration of the mucosa here. Inflammatory infiltrate is present in the lumen, and you can see dense number of polymorphonucleocytes, polymorphonucleoleucocyte present within the muscular layer of the appendix. Okay, so this is just a diagram to tell you how patient is going to behave. Peak incidence 10 to 12 years of age, but this looks big. It begins as a dull, already pain in the peri-umbilical area. Then it localizes to the right iliac fossa, pain in right iliac fossa. Patient have low-grade fever, nausea, anorexia as well. Sudden pain relief may indicate rupture of the appendix. Diagnosis is done by clinical signs and symptoms, by increased WBC count, by abdominal ultrasonography. Exploratory laparotomy is the thing done to remove the appendix so that it does not get ruptured. Rebound pain or rebound tenderness can be seen at the McBurney's point when you do the physical examination. Okay, this is just a slide to make you amuse. Okay, so next is the tumors of the appendix. Tumors of the appendix are carcinoid tumor. We have already discussed carcinoid. It can also occur in the appendix as well. Mucinous jejunoma can develop in the appendix. Mucinous adenocarcinomas can develop. Later too can produce pseudomyxoma parietoi. Secondary tumors to the appendix are less common, but the appendix can be invaded by tumors which are present in the vicinity, especially the tumors of the colon. Okay, so that's all for today. If you have any okay, sorry, peritoneal cavity is left. So just there is only one slide. Peritoneal cavity, all of you know, contains viscera, and it is lined by single layer of mesothelial cells, which are like your body epithelial cells. They are mesothelial cell lining all of the peritoneal cavity. It is supported by the thin layer of connective tissue. In the peritoneum, you can see peritoneal infection, sclerosing peritonitis, or tumors. Peritoneal infection can spread through the appendix, as I've already said. When the appendix rupture, peritonitis can develop. Sclerosing peritonitis can be seen when there is going to be sclerosis of the lining of the peritoneum. Tumors mostly are metastatic tumor to the peritoneal cavity. They can come from the ovary, they can come from the gastrointestinal tract, or they can be primary mesothelial tumors, mesothelial carcinoma of the ovary as well. Okay, so this is all for today's lecture. I'm going to unmute you. If there are any question and answer, we can ask now. Unmute button. Okay, here na 7 minutes. हमारी इधर से तो नहीं मिला. Okay. Okay, students, please raise your hand and ask questions. You can unmute yourself so we can have a little discussion. We are left with 5 to 7 minutes. Any questions? Okay, so I guess you have understood everything. Now I'm going to take your OSPE before we finish the online classes, because I'm looking after the all the 4th year syllabus, and we have almost covered all the topics. Now we are going to start with a revision, and OSPE is very important for your examination point of view. The last thing which I'm going to do this month is OSPE, and then we are going to see you when you come on 15th of September. Okay. If there are still any questions, you can write me in your WhatsApp messages. Okay, thank you. Thank you.